NeoFunk Jungle, a collab between Maki and Shadynook. This has got to be good. Immediately, this start is quite cool being AFK, but I'm really bummed the ramp you land on isn't quite aligned. It just pains me that no matter what, you're landing halfway down the ramp, and that clacking of the wheels hitting the road, just very unsatisfying. But man, I am in love with the decoration presented here. It's simply just cool. And as far as gameplay, it's on the technical side for sure, combining off-grid and on-grid building pretty seamlessly. I definitely love it, but I can see it may not be the right kind of gameplay for everyone. I really appreciate the black metal used for the main road color, as the reflectiveness helps a ton in seeing the shapes of road pieces even if the color is black, or bronze, but in this skybox it is essentially just black. But to explain my love for the decoration, it's just also unique. A good amount of the structures are only used once, and that kind of care is just special to me. The track also does not feel out of place. I think it was blended perfectly into the environment. Even just the variance in foliage is great to see. There's a bunch of different trees, bushes, and vines scattered all around. And although it's a small point, the design of the structures being more than just cubes with windows is pretty neat. Depth seems to be an important part of architecture, as I've been learning, and the variety of objects used, like this crane piece, is just a smart use of your given materials. And they really used it effectively. This is great. I have no other words other than bravo. Although I do have some more issues with the gameplay. This jump after checkpoint 2 is either unintuitive, or I have a major skill issue. I don't know how many times I was trying to precision low jump my way through it, but it was too many. All you're supposed to do is drive a bit higher, and you should have no issue catching this down ramp. And the only reason I got my mistake was looking at the orientation of the arrow, seeing my entrance angle should have been much further right. Was this even a point to make? I have no idea, but some sort of backdrop for the arrow definitely would have made me catch this sooner. But a legitimate complaint I have is this tight set of transitions before the ending. Often I feel way too fast for it, especially on this second S-bend. The entrance naturally sets you up on the left, where I'd rather be on the right and take it smoother. Getting airtime and losing speed, or not even making the turn at all, was a commonality for me here. One last thing I want to mention is the moon. I love it. Using the skybox as more than just a background is 100% underutilized, and this just made me smile when I first saw it. It was too cute. Overall, I may have to give the one and only score this series will ever see a 0 out of 10, because Maki took my mushrooms. But in all seriousness, this is a tough track to complete as well as master, just because the line is quite precise. It won't be for everybody, but for people that like to play new and unique levels, this will surely be right up your alley. And if you just like cool decoration, this also fulfills that greatly.
Next on the list is Red Ribbon by Maou. First of all, this is a unique one, as I believe I was told this map is a real-life recreation of an existing jungle gym. Most of the track pieces are not meant to be connected together on this layout, and it can get janky at times, but it also brings the somewhat unique transitions that I haven't seen a lot elsewhere. Okay, straight into the positives. The unaligned off-grid track pieces make a unique feel driving on large parts of the layout. Something that I haven't seen a lot elsewhere yet. This factor alone makes quite a fun experience to drive on. The jungle gym decoration is quite pleasing and very well done, and actually looks like something you may occasionally see in parks and such. Of course, the colors are approved for no particular reason, to an extent. Of course, this being Maou's first track, there are some noticeable issues. The first one being, as mentioned at the start, the track pieces are not connected smoothly, which can end up throwing you off the track, lose a ton of speed, or just generally have a rough time if you have a bad entrance to a corner. Secondly, there are quite a few turns that are hard to sight read, a bit blind, and you are most likely doomed to fail until you get a bit of experience with it. Last but not least, the track definitely lacks checkpoints, proven by the cut you can do before the last uphill. Checkpoints are not just meant for cut preventions, but also important information to keep you updated to compare to your best performance. So I would definitely recommend at least doubling the amount of checkpoints. Okay, one more section. A couple extra points I made. Some parts of the track are fan supported to help you not fall off, but it's hard to see those specific spots. The track width is very small and a lot easier to fall off at any point of the map. There are a couple spots on the map where you can stall out and get speed checked if you didn't perform well enough at the previous section. Despite there being third and first person gates at points, sometimes it's hard to tell your orientation, especially in first person. The AFK takes you to a cute message. Unfortunately, it's missing an extra channel. So, finally, at the end, it's a fun and challenging mech that will test your precision and car control on most, if not all, the turns, but it feels very satisfying to get to the finish, but it is also as frustrating to fail at some of the turns.
Next up is Zookist. Oh boy, here we go. Please be aware that this track is 6,600 pieces, so the recording may look a little stuttery. Anyways, where do I even start? I love this track. I think a lot of us do. The mix between gameplay and decoration is simply just great. Neither feels sacrificed for the other. The routing has some buttery smooth transitions, with a few small corner cuts that are well represented with arrows. Each area is distinctly distinct, starting with a panda enclosure, a jungle enclosure, a whole aquarium, the warm savanna into the icy cold tundra, and through the gift shop out the exit. But before we continue with my overall gushing, I do want to point out some issues courtesy of Lexer and Maki. For one, while this isn't as bad as other multipath maps, the same thing still occurs where the fastest route quickly becomes the only route to take. The first corner, the normal route loses you well over a whole second. This small jump in the aquarium, which feels a lot smoother than the normal route, the corner cut through the giraffe, which being grass can be quite difficult to pull off, this semi-blind jump in the tundra area, the arrow helps, but there is still a lot of guesswork to do to find the right landing, and the long way through the gift shop, which actually feels much harder than the short route in my opinion. But multipaths are far from bad aspects. Just make sure they're still fun and don't detract from the main path too much, and they should be fine, like they are here. Moving on, this transition in the jungle enclosure can be blind if you're really aiming for that inside line. Just that the edge of this rock is perfectly placed to make it look like you can cut right around it, only to crash on the hidden second edge. I can say for sure this actually got me a few times. Additionally, the little chicane at the end of the aquarium is really not fun to drive, especially at speed. It's somewhat blind and super tight when you're going through at upwards of 148 speed or maybe higher. To me, this seems like a minor oversight in not tuning for faster players, which we all know is very hard to combat. Just a bit of extra breathing room here would have fixed it though. And lastly, we have 3 small issues with the Arctic enclosure. For one, I would have liked to see the arrow appear at least centered on the window, or on the right side so you can line yourself up nicer for the small corner cut inside. Right after the corner cut is this icy dip through the sausage road piece, which I think we would all like to be a little longer. Especially on the low friction materials, it can be frustrating to clip your wheels on the edges here. And while there are air conditioning units on other buildings, there doesn't appear to be any cooling system for this one, and that just doesn't seem safe for the little penguins. But before we wrap up, I just can't end without showing off all the great creatures. Get ready, cause there's turtles, pandas, AFK man, cool guys, gorillas, a toucan, alligators, someone having a bad day, seals, dolphins, does this count as a whale? Octopus, stingray, crab, fishes, Bruce, all of these cute guys, zebra, giraffe, rhino, someone having a bad day number 2, ostrich having a great day, lions, hippos, an elephant, penguins, pingoos, polar bear, a lighter, freckles plush, and I checked, I could only find this snowy owl in the gift shop and nowhere else. Oh, and they're even selling some Maki flowers. And that's it. The amount of detail put into this map is actually mind-boggling. I found myself finding new thing after new thing to add to the already large list of stuff I love in this map. I highly recommend you check this out for yourself if you can, even just have a look around in photo mode and appreciate it all. Sorry not sorry if it kills your computer though.
Spaghety Love Song is a first-person map that is almost entirely inside tubes. Most of your time gains will come from how well you can navigate all these turns whilst keeping your speed. Unfortunately, being as twisty and turny as it is, the key to doing well on this track also comes from memorization, as even though it is in first person, these turns can be really tight, so your reaction time has to be top notch. Signs may help, but keep in mind this map was made nearly 2 years ago. way before we had the sign standards we see in the game today. Can't really blame the builder for the lack of them in this track when you consider that. But onto more specific things. The decoration for this level is certainly pretty, nailing that balance between interesting and simple. It looks great but keeps the attention on the track itself. And considering the gameplay going in pretty much every possible direction, it was a smart decision to decorate it 360 degrees all the way around. It's quite nice that the track is distinct from the environment, and it uses the white glass consistently from start to finish. And although you do have to memorize some turns, the fact that it is glass can make reading and reacting a lot easier in parts that would normally include each other, just as long as you're not accidentally looking at a different part of the track entirely. Now, onto some issues with the level. Two spots are particularly blind, the two places you would want to corkscrew, checkpoint 4 and checkpoint 6. Most people would likely end up upside down after their first tries on these two spots, as generally it makes sense to try turning right on a right turn. It could take a fair amount of experimenting to come to the conclusion that you need to turn left to corkscrew around. This is more of an issue for beginner players though, and if the checkpoint 6 area wasn't bad enough, it has some pretty terrible connections. It's difficult to get through here without a nasty bounce, and it just doesn't feel great. I guess we can excuse this for the time it was made, but rest assured something like this would not fly today with all the tools at our disposal now. Moving on, there appears to be some booster RNG. We were tricked at first when we saw that they were only one force, only to be blown away by them, by the fact that there are 13 of them stacked on top of each other at checkpoint 5. Pretty sure that makes up for the low force, although seeing as we're definitely hitting the 200 speed limit anyways, it may not even matter at all. Just don't trust your speed at checkpoint 5 there. However, while on the topic of boosters anyways, might as well mention the booster on the loop after checkpoint 7 is easy to miss. Simply, it is placed too high up relative to the pipe and will require some small oscillation to get its full effect. Since there aren't currently any tube-friendly boosters in the game, just make sure you don't end up with something like this in your own tracks. But for the final thought, while the whole track being in first person certainly helps visibility over third person, it does mean you can't tell when your tires are smoking, and being at nearly 200 speed the entire time, there are a few spots to slide out quite easily. Overall, it's a tough but classic Zeepkist map, with features that hold it back from the time it was made, and some that still hold up today. You can't argue that this style isn't unique, and anyone looking for a different kind of challenge can definitely find some enjoyment out of this.
Zwimpie Clean Sprint, a very Mario Kart inspired track that exudes the same kind of feeling just right. From the theming of the decoration to the few small alternate routes to take, I think the creators of this map made exactly what they were trying to make. But does a Mario Kart track translate well into Zeepkist? We'll have to see. All the assets made for this track have that perfect balance between detail and simplicity, though you may not believe it's only 1,500 pieces. But I guess the large scale kind of helps with that lack of detail, or as I'll call it, a clean aesthetic. The way the whole bathroom is put together is honestly just great. Everything is pretty much to scale, and the only thing that may put you off is the pipe coming out of the floor. Everywhere in this track there seems to be little details I think most of us would normally gloss over. But there's paintings, a shelf with toilet paper, washing machine, everything a bathroom needs, even a lighter. There's the leaky faucet at the beginning, or the trail of puddles leading from the shower to the toilet, bottles of soap spilling open with their caps off, or even the fact the drain plug is being whisked away. I can even call this laundry basket optimized. By the way, this desk fan may just be the best use of the funnel object I've ever seen, you just can't top this. I could go on, but there are some actual issues I do want to point out here. While there are some alternate routes to save time and/or speed, they can be relatively hidden in terms of Zeepkist standards. For example, on the big jump off the book, you will probably notice the descending ramp of sponges in the bath. Now, it's hard to say, because I first played this track a while ago now, but I think it makes sense for players to infer they'd want to jump off the book to get to these sponges. I mean, while driving, it's really not noticeable you can just decide to not take the jump. You tell me which is a more tempting thing to do as you drive past this section. This kind of thing almost makes it seem like the level is required to be seen in photo mode if you want to find the fastest path, which I guess you could argue is on the player or the mapper either way. But, moving along, I know some people definitely don't like this entrance to the drain. I applaud the efforts done here to try and make this work the best it can, but honestly, I feel it breaks the flow of the level too much, and it can also just be a really mean transition. Coming bouncing down the sponges can totally give you a bad entrance angle, as you can barely stay on the ground long enough to get traction to actually steer yourself. The thing is, I don't really think there's any better way to do this exact transition. But personally, I would have opted for some sort of spiraling or swirling down the drain tube to avoid these issues. Anyways, let me just get the rest of my thoughts out. There's a pretty simple time save you can do coming out of the pipe by landing on this book. Is it blind? Technically yes, but it's also so obvious there's almost no way you wouldn't go for it for your second run. This booster through the pencils is pointed out quite nicely with the split arrow here. I have no problems with this, but it does make me question why this wasn't used to show the alternate path for the book jump I mentioned earlier. And these banked pieces at the end just feel misleading. They're very tempting to drive on, doubly so because they have boosters on them. But I mean, they're the only track pieces in this section, and yet the fastest way is just to cut through it entirely? It feels like an odd choice, and the way you just cut through everything is very unsatisfying to me. So overall, I find this to be a really well decorated track with a lot of clever optimizations, but the gameplay itself feels a little lacking. Does it look fun? For sure, but does it play fun? It's hard to say really, but if we consider the fact that most of the route is just a lot of flat sections, I hate to say it, but it's a little underwhelming. And for the final review, we have Bricked Up. No, not like that. Which feels like a very classic Zeepkist map. And seeing as the creator just got back to the game from quite the long break, it makes sense. One small thing to note as we start is the start. It's just too long, taking almost 6 seconds to need any input. This is less a problem in single player, but is substantial in multiplayer lobbies. When we're starting a run adds 6 seconds that could have just not been there, it adds up, and you get less overall chances to play the map. Anyways, the theme here is that everything is made of bricks. Pretty unique actually, maybe a future ZSL theme. But this level is overall very well put together. The color palette is nice and bright, it gives off a very happy and innocent feeling. And this feels like it'd fit perfectly within the adventure mode, and plays very similar to the earlier levels. And I really enjoy the extra bits of track placed around just for decoration. They are well enough out of the way, so nobody should get confused by their presence, but they add just a bit more detail to the surroundings that this level definitely needed. Unfortunately, the love for this level ends there, as I do have quite a few issues to go over here. First of all, this down ramp with the fan is just awkwardly tuned. You get way too much airtime even with the fan, and it feels generally quite unsatisfying. With the techniques the player base have developed over time, this is a perfect place to perform a crest break technique, which lets you stick to the ramp and gain more than 5 speed to carry through the next sections. Is this bad? I think it's fine, personally, but it is important to know these kind of things as a mapper. Players getting more speed than intended is more common than you'd think for beginner mappers, and any kind of transition can be affected by it, especially jumps. But moving on, this wall ride is just way too tall for no reason. I guess I like it aesthetically, but you wouldn't even want to go halfway up the wall here, so it feels a bit out of place. But if we continue further along, wall rides. I think most players will notice something like this now, getting on the outside border to save a ton more speed than turning manually. Thankfully, there is a booster right after, meaning any speed gained from taking the longer way around is immediately lost. The reason I'm still pointing it out though is it doesn't feel intended, and is probably just a happy coincidence. So again, just something to add to the list of things players will try when they play your map. You definitely need to be careful of wall rides. And if we go even further beyond, there's another very tempting wall ride, an inner this time. But rest assured, even if it does look perfectly set up to pull off, I determined it was not faster than just taking the normal road, because of this rollover transition right after. But finally, the very last thing to add, may I ask how this level is 1600 objects? Oh, no scaling. We have a lot of mods to help spruce up our level making skills now, and scaling objects to cover a large area is a very common thing nowadays. There just is no reason to layer pieces like this anymore. It wastes both a ton of your time having to place all of them, and possibly the frames of your players. I took the time to remake the majority of the structures here with scaled objects, and I saved, drumroll please, 907 pieces. That is simply absurd if I'm honest, way more than even I expected. And I know for a fact there's even more to save, because I got kinda lazy and only did the major parts. So I guess you know something is wrong if more than half your entire level didn't even need to be there. And even though next update will include scaling options in the base game, for now, please make use of the editor mods we have access to. Oh, and by the way, you forgot to add the brick texture to this container's lettering. But overall, this is a fine level with some minor and major oversights. But for a first level back from a long break, I think this is pretty acceptable. Wait, don't go yet. At the end of each episode now, I'm going to compile all or most of the crashes and fails I had when recording. Hope you all can enjoy my suffering.